This is the final and most important part of a 4-part series I intended to stitch together into a documentary with hopes of proving that the Bible is the old world or Tartarian origin story. And not only that, but the Bible is from the old world, and it's the story of the rise and fall of the old world. If you ever wonder why there's so many references to Christendom and Jesus all over these buildings, and yet you still happen to see statues, artwork, symbolism pointing towards pagan nations and sun worship, the Bible tells us everything that we need to know. And it's all centered around the idea that Solomon sold God's wisdom. Chokmah, the Hebrew word chokmah, which can be translated as skill, is used to reference craftsmanship and could be referencing technology. He sold this wisdom, technology, craftsmanship, skill, to all of the nations of the earth for 666 talents of gold. This is wisdom that was supposed to be used to glorify God. All of the nations of the earth were supposed to look at Israel and say, wow, their God is good. We can't do that. We're not as prosperous. We're not as innovative. And say, wow, their God is good, and turn to God. As we do today, they were supposed to look at the skill, magnificence, and divine inspiration that goes into these buildings and say, this cannot be done except by the hand of the one true living God. But instead, Solomon in 1 Kings 11:7 built an altar to Moloch, and he sold this wisdom to all the nations of the earth to be self-serving, to glorify himself, to multiply wives, horses, and gold, which God said not to do in Deuteronomy 17. Sophos, the Greek New Testament word for wise, can also be translated as learned or skilled, and is often translated as such. Just like chokmah, the Hebrew Old Testament word for wisdom or wise, can be translated as skill. Both sophos and chokmah are used as a substitute for craftsmanship, expertise, or technology, and are frequently used to describe stonemasonry and craftsmanship. Okay, so in these first 3 verses, wisdom is being personified, making it the subject. So when it says I, it's talking about wisdom. I, wisdom. Then I, wisdom, was beside him. Proverbs 8:1. Doth not wisdom cry, and understanding utter her voice? Proverbs 8:12. I, wisdom, dwell with prudence, and find out knowledge and counsels. Proverbs 8:30. Then I, wisdom, was beside him as a master craftsman, and I was daily his delight, rejoicing always before him. Proverbs 9:1. Wisdom has built a palace supported on 7 pillars. Proverbs 24:3-6. Through wisdom is a house builded, and with understanding it is established. And by knowledge shall the chambers be filled with all precious and pleasant riches. This verse, Proverbs 9:1, wisdom has built a palace supported on 7 pillars, is so important. It tells you plain as day everything that you need to know. Wisdom, as we understand it, is not the same wisdom or chokmah from the Bible. This will make so much more sense when we go through the entire story of Solomon. Mark 13:1-2. And as he went out of the temple, one of his disciples said unto him, Master, see what manner of stones and what manner of buildings are here? And Jesus answered and said unto him, Seest thou these great buildings? There shall not be left one stone upon a stone that shall not be broken down. Luke 21:5. And as some spoke of the temple, how it was garnished with goodly stones and consecrated things, he said. Jesus and the apostles described the buildings, their surroundings, their cities as magnificent, costly, and great. When you hear about these cities and buildings described in the Old or New Testament, all you hear about is how grand, impressive, and luxurious they were. And none of this stuff is even like conspiracy theory. Modern secular history has a hard time hiding this, because if you even look at what they're telling us now, for example, the Roman Forum we see here was there during Jesus' time. They don't even deny that. And it's just consistent with what the Bible says. I believe that God used Solomon's betrayal in the eventual mass production of these buildings all around the world as his permanent watermark for history in the Bible on the earth. Acts 7:22. And Moses was learned in all the wisdom of the Egyptians, and was mighty in words and in deeds. 1 Corinthians 3:10. According to the grace of God given unto me, as a skillful master builder, I have laid the foundation, and another buildeth thereon. But let every man take heed how he buildeth upon it. And skillful is the Greek word sophos. It means wise and is often translated as wise. Now that we've established that wisdom has this strong connection to skilled workmanship, craftsmanship, technology, building, stonemasonry, etc., we've established that the wisdom of the Bible is not just knowledge as we know it today. Now there's more context for its use in the story of Solomon. Deuteronomy 17:16 through 17. In any wise he shall not prepare him many horses, nor bring the people again into Egypt. For to increase the number of horses, seeing the Lord has said unto you, ye shall henceforth go no more that way again. Neither shall he take him many wives, lest his heart turn away. Neither shall he gather him much silver and gold. And if thou wilt walk in my ways, to keep my statutes and my commandments, as thy father David did walk, then I will lengthen thy days. 1 Kings 4:20. Judah and Israel were many, even as the sand which is by the sea in the multitude, eating and drinking and making merry. 1 Kings 5:17 through 18. And the king commanded, and they brought great stones, costly stones, and hewed stones, to lay the foundation of the house. And Solomon's builders and Hiram's builders did hew them, and the stone squarers. So they prepared timber and stones to build the house. 1 Kings 6:7. And the house, when it was in building, was built of stone made ready before it was brought thither, so that there was neither hammer, nor axe, nor tool of iron heard in the house, while it was in building. 1 Kings 7:1 through 13. But Solomon was building his own house 13 years, and he finished all his house. He built also the house of the forest of Lebanon. The length thereof was 100 cubits, and the breadth thereof 50 cubits, and the height thereof 30 cubits, upon 4 rows of cedar pillars, with cedar beams upon the pillars. And it was covered with cedar upon the beams that lay on the 45 pillars, 15 in a row. And his house where he dwelt had another court within the porch, which was of the like work. Solomon made also a house for Pharaoh's daughter, whom he had taken to wife, like unto this porch. All these were of costly stones, according to the measure of hewed stones, sawed with saws, within and without, even from the foundation unto the coping, and so on the outside towards the great court. And the foundation was of costly stones, even great stones, stones of 10 cubits, and stones of 8 cubits. And above were costly stones, after the measure of hewed stones and cedars. 1 Kings 7:15. For he cast 2 pillars of brass, of 18 cubits, high apiece, and a line of 12 cubits did compass either of them about. 1 Kings 7:29. And on the border that were between the ledges were lions, oxen, and cherubims. And upon the ledges there was a base above, and beneath the lions the oxen were certain additions made of thin work. 1 Kings 7:36. For on the plates of the ledges thereof, and on the borders thereof, he graved cherubims, lions, and palm trees, according to the proportion of everyone, and the additions round about. So what do we have so far? We have God setting ground rules for the kings of Israel in Deuteronomy 17, saying they shouldn't take many wives, they shouldn't multiply horses or gold for themselves. We have extremely artful, ornate, and intricate artwork being engraved on large buildings that surpass what we are able to do today. We have buildings better than anything that we can make today being built in just 13 years. The stoneworkers are squaring and forming blocks off the site before moving them to the site where they're being assembled with no noise or tools. And this is very important, so note this for later. We have what sounds like old world buildings that we can see today being engraved with cherubims and lions. We also hear of this very prosperous and wise society as being as numerous as the sands of the sea, so a very large population. Now this next verse in 1 Kings 8 is very important because it's saying that all of the nations of the earth were supposed to look at this wisdom, technology, craftsmanship, and be impressed. They were supposed to see God's thumbprint, his divinity in this, and be impressed and drawn towards God. It was supposed to glorify God. 1 Kings 8:43. Then hear thou in heaven thy dwelling place, and do according to all that the stranger calleth to thee for, that all the people of the earth may know thy name, to fear thee, as do thy people Israel, that they may know that this house which I have builded is called by thy name. 1 Kings 9:26 through 28. And King Solomon made a navy of ships in Ezingeber, which is besides Elath, and on the shore of the Red Sea in the land of Edom. And Hiram sent in the navy his servants, shipmen that had knowledge of the sea, with the servants of Solomon. And they came to Ophir, and fetched from thence gold 420 talents, and brought it to King Solomon. 1 Kings 10:14. Now the weight of gold that came to Solomon in 1 year was 666 talents of gold. 1 Kings 11:7. Then did Solomon build a high place for Chemosh, the abomination of Moab, in the hill that is before Jerusalem, and for Moloch, the abomination of the children of Ammon. So now we're really getting to the meat and potatoes of the situation, the story. We see that Hiram, Tyre, the Phoenicians, the Canaanites, they're all the same thing. They have a great navy, right? And they're working hand in hand with Solomon. And they're creating monolithic stones, and they're engraving them with beautiful, ornate artwork. Now, what happens when we look at the modern day site of Canaan, Lebanon, Baalbek, Tyre, Phoenicia? Well, we see monoliths, insane monoliths, something that we could never do today, and perfectly symmetrical, straight, stone engravings of the star of Remphan, the cube of Saturn, which is the same star that's mentioned in Acts 7:43 and Amos 5:26. This star is mentioned in conjunction with the Canaanite god Moloch. So shortly after Solomon took 666 talents of gold from all of the nations of the earth, in 1 Kings 10:14, he took 1,000 strange wives against the commandments of God. In 1 Kings 11:3, what happens just after that? 1 Kings 11:7, he builds an altar to Moloch. He became corrupted. He became self-serving. He sold this wisdom that was meant to glorify God to the Canaanites, Hiram of If. And that's the legend of Freemasonry. And this technology, wisdom, craftsmanship that was meant to glorify God has now effectively become public domain because of the Canaanites' great navy, the Phoenicians' great navy, and all of these nations seeking Solomon and him just giving it without discretion to enrich himself with many wives, horses, and gold, which God told him not to do. This is why we see artwork and symbology referencing countless pagan, occult, and mythological belief systems from all around the world. 2 Chronicles 4:17 through 22. In the plain of Jordan did the king cast them, and in the clay ground between the Succoth and the Zeredeth. Thus Solomon made all these vessels in great abundance, for the weight of brass could not be found. And Solomon made all the vessels that were for the house of God, the golden altar also, and the tables whereon the showbread was set. Moreover, the candlesticks with their lamps, that they should burn after the manner before the oracle of pure gold. And the flowers, and the lamps, and the tongs made he of gold, and that perfect gold. The snuffers also, and the basins, and the spoons, and the censers of pure gold. And the entry of the house, the inner doors thereof for the most holy place, and the doors of the house of the temple were gold. 2 Chronicles 9:13 through 18. And the weight of gold that came to Solomon in 1 year was 666 talents of gold. besides that which of the chapmen and merchants brought. And all the kings of Arabia and the governors of the country brought gold and silver to Solomon. And Solomon made 200 targets of beaten gold. 600 shekels of beaten gold went to one target. 2 Chronicles 9:20-28. And all the drinking vessels of King Solomon were of gold, and all the vessels of the house of the forest of Lebanon were pure gold. None were of silver. It was nothing esteemed in the days of Solomon. For the king's ships went to Tarshish with the servants of Hiram. Every 3 years once came the ships out of Tarshish, bringing gold and silver, ivory and apes and peacocks. And Solomon passed all the kings of the earth in riches and in wisdom. And all the kings of the earth sought the presence of Solomon to hear his wisdom that God had put in his heart. And all the kings of the earth sought the presence of Solomon to hear his wisdom that God had put in his heart. And Solomon passed all the kings of the earth in riches and in wisdom. And all the kings of the earth sought the presence of Solomon to hear his wisdom that God had put in his heart. And they brought every man his present, vessels of silver and vessels of gold, and raiment and harness and spices, horses and mules, at a rate year by year. And Solomon had 4,000 stalls of horses and chariots, and 12,000 horsemen, whom he bestowed in the chariot cities and with the king at Jerusalem. And he reigned over all the kings from the river even unto the land of the Philistines and to the border of Egypt. And the king made silver in Jerusalem as stones, and cedar trees made he at the sycamore trees that are in the low plains in abundance. And they brought unto Solomon horses out of Egypt, and out of all lands. Now, just to recap before taking this a step further, what have we seen so far? 1. God sets 3 rules for Israelite kings. Do not take many strange wives, do not multiply horses, and do not gather yourself much silver and gold, all of which Solomon broke. 2. God gives Solomon the chokmah, skill, craftsmanship, or technology to create these buildings in order to make Israel a testament to God and a marvel to all the nations. 3. Solomon and the Canaanites, who had a skilled navy, made several massive, artful, impressive, and technologically advanced buildings in a short span, perhaps half a lifetime or less. The temple alone only took 13 years. 4. They had an extremely wealthy and prosperous society with a very high population. 5. All of the nations were impressed with the temple that Solomon built, and they came with bribes of riches to extort the wisdom from God out of Solomon to secure these secrets for themselves. 6. Solomon takes many horses from Egypt. He accepts 666 talents of gold, enriching himself from all the nations of the earth. 7. Solomon takes 1,000 strange wives, who turn him into an occult idol worshipper, when he ultimately builds an altar to the god of child sacrifice, Moloch. 8. Many of these buildings were still around during the time of Jesus. Put all these things together and we have a much clearer picture of what happened. God gave this skill to the Israelites so that other nations could read his glory on them. But Solomon became corrupt and sold this skill to all the nations of the earth, which is why you see occult symbolism and idols on much of this architecture. Now, this is what I've been really wanting to get to, and everything so far has just been leading up to this, setting the stage. Many of you might know, the Tartarian flag has what they call a griffin on it. I'm declaring right here and now that this is not a griffin. This is a cherubim. 1 Kings 6:19-32. In the oracle he prepared in the house within, to set there the ark of the covenant of the Lord. And the oracle in the forepart was 20 cubits in length, and 20 cubits in breadth, and 20 cubits in the height thereof, and he overlaid it with pure gold. He overlaid also the altar of cedar. So Solomon overlaid the house within with pure gold, and he made bars of gold before the oracle, and he overlaid it with gold. And the whole house he overlaid with gold, until he had finished all the house. Also, the whole altar that was by the oracle he overlaid with gold. And within the oracle he made 2 cherubims of olive tree, each 10 cubits high. 5 cubits was one wing of the cherub, and 5 cubits the other wing of the cherub. From the utmost part of one wing unto the utmost part of the other were 10 cubits. And he set the cherubim within the inner house, and they stretched forth the wings of the cherubims, so that the wing of one touched the wall, and the wing of the other cherubim touched the other wall. And their wings touched one another in the midst of the house, and he overlaid the cherubims with gold. Ezekiel 1:10. And the similitude of their faces was as the face of man, and the four had the face of the lion on the right side, and the four had the face of an ox on the left side, and the four also had the face of an eagle. Ezekiel 10:14. And everyone had 4 faces. The first face was the face of a cherub, and the second face was the face of a man, and the third face of a lion, and the fourth face of an eagle. Revelation 4:7-8. And the first beast was like a lion, and the second beast like a calf, and the third beast had the face as a man, and the fourth beast was like a flying eagle. And the 4 beasts each had one of them 6 wings about him, and they were full of eyes within, and they ceased not day or night, saying, Holy, 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 Lord God Almighty, which was, which is, and which is to come. So I'm declaring right here and now that all of these alleged griffins that we see on all of these buildings or all around the world are not actually griffins but cherubim. And whenever we see this, it's a reference to the origin story of Solomon's temple. Not only did Solomon put 2 massive cherubim, which are described as eagle, lion creatures with wings, but Moses actually had 2 cherubim on the Ark of the Covenant as well. And the Ark of the Covenant was, of course, ultimately placed inside of the temple. Additionally, after Adam and Eve had eaten from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, in Genesis 3:24, God set cherubim to guard the tree of life in the Garden of Eden. Thus he cast out the man, and at the east side of the Garden of Eden he set the cherubims, and the blade of a sword shaken, to keep the way of the tree of life. So if this biblical account of how the old world came about is true, then we should be able to see real world examples of this, right? Well, we can. In fact, references to this are all over ancient architecture all around the world. Now remember, this is all stylized artwork of cherubim. Sometimes they're depicted as having the face of a man like we just saw. Sometimes they have the face of an eagle, and sometimes they have the face of a lion. And more rare yet, you can sometimes see features of calves or cows in there. So this is one of the best examples that I can find of cherubim guarding the tree of life from Genesis 3:24. And no, this isn't some one-off, this is something we see time and time again. For example, this is in Italy. And notice the pine cone-like shoot coming straight up out of the pot, because you'll see this everywhere. For example, on the Wrigley building in Chicago, and here's another great example of how cherubim have been stylized. Like, these ones are even transforming into plants, basically. Like, they have flowers coming out of their tails. And again, we see the shoot. This is in Oshkosh, Wisconsin, and again, you can see the 2 cherub with the tree in between them. This is in Hautes-Pyrénées, France. Here in Athens, Greece, we have 2 cherubim with human faces and the pine cone-like shoot in between them, like we saw in the first picture. Now they would call these sphinxes, but really, griffins, sphinxes, and cherubim are all the same thing, and they're just trying to hide that. These cherubim are on the Buffalo Museum of Science in Buffalo, New York. Now these next 2 examples, while still notable, are missing the tree of life in the middle, but this is found within the Prague Castle complex in Prague, Czech Republic. And finally, back to Italy. Now here in the original artwork for the 1599 Geneva translation, you can see that the symbol for the house of Judah, which is the house of Solomon, David, and Jesus, actually has a potential griffin, but definitely a lion with a serpent's tongue as the symbol for the house of Judah. And interestingly enough, yet again in Italy, you can see on the right the seal for the tribe of Judah. And in the middle, you can see 2 lions with a coat of arms. And on the left, cherubim are sometimes depicted as chubby winged babies. We have 2 cherubim with what looks like King Solomon's temple in the middle. Now, I need to make it clear that this alleged griffin on the flag is really just Freemasons who got the Mason work for free, making fun of you by kind of pointing in the direction of telling you that they know the true origin story of these buildings. Yes, the Rothschilds, the royal monarchy, King Charles, Queen Elizabeth, they all know the true origins of these stories, as all do high-ranking Freemasons. That's what the Tartaria psyop is all about. That's why they put the griffin or the lion on the Tartarian flag. That's why Freemasonry is all about metaphorically building King Solomon's temple, and it uses rituals surrounding Hiram-Abiff and King Solomon. Anytime you see a cherub on the monarchy's clothing, Freemasonry's artwork, or the Tartarian flag, it's a reference to King Solomon's temple, the cherubs. Now we're at a crossroads here. We need to make a decision. Do we believe the biblical account of Jesus, Solomon, David, perhaps even Moses, weren't just walking around in rags, groveling, poor, in the dirt? No, what the Bible actually says was they were in an extremely prosperous and wealthy society. It describes ornate golden statues and sculptures. It describes impressive palaces with hundreds of pillars. Meanwhile, people in the know, like satanic, Masonic, Joe Rogan and Eddie Bravo, who believe that they should rule over us, try to hide the truth from us, and they push this idea of steampunk, science-based, recent Tartaria, and they just built these buildings 200 or 300 years ago. This is the classic Masonic conditioning of controlling the opposition, saying, well, we know the truth, but we need to set a narrative for the public in case they figure it out. So the Pharisees, the Rothschilds, the high-ranking Freemasons, the papacy, they all believe in this idea of being the gatekeepers of truth, being the rulers over the slaves. This is an idea from Plato. Plato wrote about how there's meant to be this dynamic of rulers and slaves. And that's what they all believe, that they're the lions amongst the sheep. They're meant to rule over us. Albert Pike and Helena Blavatsky wrote about the vile multitude, the vulgar, the profane. That's referring to us, any of the uninitiated, the people who are not occultists. They see us as lesser than them, so they have to lie to us and control us. The papacy, the Jesuits, the Freemasons, the Knights Templars, all of these secret societies are modeled after ancient Mesopotamian, Babylonian, Egyptian mystery religions. And in those societies, they ruled over the people with an iron fist. Anyone had to come to the leadership, the rulers, for truth, God, intercession, food, resources, housing, etc. Anything and everything. And the people in power today would love nothing less than exactly that. And that's what they would love to bring the world back to. And that's what they're trying to bring the world back to with data centers and AI. And one of the best ways for them to do this is to make you into a working class slave, a thoughtless automaton. This is primarily achieved by cutting you off from your spiritual connection and truth about God and our history. So it only makes sense that they would lie about and cover up our history, inserting their Masonic characters and actors into every facet of our reality and fake history. That's why we have people like Richard Morris Hunt here, who allegedly designed 245 stone palaces. Some of them conflicting, some of them done in 1 to 3 years. These are fairy tales for adults. Thanks for watching. If you appreciate the content, be sure to turn on bell notifications, like, comment, share, or subscribe.